Hey guys, Eighth Echo here. Today I'm going to be going over a disenchanting guide for Hearthstone. I'm going to be covering the rare, epic, and legendary cards for neutral. I'm going to do a little flip on it. I'm going to list the cards that you should not disenchant. Right here, I'll bring them up. I'll bring them up on screen. Here's a list of all the cards. Rare on the left, epic, and then legendary in the rightmost column. They're marked with red and yellow dots. The red dot represents cards that you must have, in my opinion, that are must-haves that you should always have. The non-marked cards are I'm kind of neutral about it, but you should have them. And the yellow cards are the on-the-fence kind of cards that fit into certain decks that you could possibly, in a pinch, disenchant if you had to. These cards you shouldn't disenchant. You should keep these cards. Everything else other than these cards you can disenchant. They serve probably no purpose or serve a very niche deck that you can just get the dust for. If you're starting off, you can just get the dust and make commons or rares that you need to make in order to fill out your deck. Okay, so now I'm going to go over each one of these cards and give the reasoning behind why it's kept from disenchanting. So I'll go over which cards not to disenchant and why, what value they have in any kind of deck or whatever. So we'll start with the rares. As you can see here, I made a deck so we can just have easy reference to the cards. Ancient Watcher. I'll go through all of them, and then I'll tell you which ones to keep two of, or definitely keep, and the ones that are kind of like on the fence, and the ones that are neutral, like it's okay to have. You should have them, but they're not going to be in every deck. So we have Ancient Watcher, Knife Juggler, Nerubian Egg, Sun Fury Protector, Wild Pyromancer, Arcane Golem, Injured Blade Master, Mind Control Tech, Arcane Nullifier, Defender of Argus, Jeeves, the Kazan Mystic? I don't know. I said Kazan, but that's wrong. Twilight Drake, Violet Teacher, Azure Drake, blah, Bomb Lobber, Grim Patron, Mad Bomber, Sludge Belcher, Stampeding Kodo, Argent Commander. I think there's a couple more. Oh, there they are. Gadget Stan. Can't say that today. Auctioneer. It's late. I'm tired. And Sunwalker. Okay, so now we'll go through the importance of each card and what I have listed as on the fence cards that you don't necessarily need to have the card, but it's good to have it just in case. So we'll start with Ancient Watcher. Ancient Watcher is primarily used in Handlock. Occasionally you'll see them in Druid decks, but not really. So if you don't plan on playing Handlock, you can go ahead and disenchant these. The next one I have that isn't that important, I guess, is Arcane Golem. This card's primarily used in Face Hunter to get 4 damage for 3 mana, and charge minion, obviously. I see it occasionally in other aggro decks, Paladin. But if you don't plan on playing aggro, you can go ahead and disenchant this one. Arcane Nullifier. This card I've only ever seen played in a Shaman mech deck. So when the Shaman has the 3/2 weapon and it gives +2/+2 when it is destroyed, they try to buff this up. This is also good in conjunction with whatever the totem. I forgot the totems. I haven't played Shaman in so long, but it's only played in Shaman. I don't see it playing in any other deck really. Seriously, I don't see it played. Jeeves is an interesting card. People played around with this card a little bit. You can play this card in aggro decks like Hunter and Paladin, but Hunter doesn't really suffer too much from card draw, and Paladin has Divine Spirit, which like refills your hand better than Jeeves. So I guess Jeeves is a disenchant if it's based off of your playstyle. If he doesn't fit into your playstyle, I would disenchant him. Violet Teacher, I've only seen it used in rogue decks. It's like Oil Rogue, or people try to attempt to Miracle Rogue like me. And I've seen it used in a couple other decks, but primarily it's a rogue deck card. Bomb Lobber, I mean, it isn't a bad card. It does, you know, it does what it says, but again, this is it goes into play style. It fits into some decks, doesn't fit into most. So it's at your discretion. Grim Patron is only for the Grim Patron deck, which is Warrior. I've seen people try it in different decks, but not successfully. It works best in Warrior. Matter Bomber, you don't see too often. It works well. It's too much RNG based, and people like more damage that they can count on. So that's why they'll choose Bomb Lobber over Matter Bomber. But Matter Bomber's fun too if you want to play around with it. Stampede and Kodo is used in some Paladin decks because they have the ability to reduce minions' attack to 1, and they use this to kill off a minion. I've seen it rarely in a Priest deck where they can shrink the attack. Seeing a Kodo is pretty rare. You might see it in a Hunter deck. I mean, it's not rare. It's uncommon to see it, but it's again at your discretion to disenchant or not. Gadget Stand, Auctioneer. This is primarily used in rogue decks. Rogues have a lot of spells used in miracle style decks like Rogue, Druid. That's about it. And you don't really see this card anymore. It's pretty rare. Some people try to do the Emperor Thorson Miracle version of Rogue like me with the Auctioneer. That's when you might see it. But again, this card is on the fringe case for disenchanting. Up next is the rare cards that are not on the fence, but they're not must-haves. They're just cards that you should have, I guess. Nerubian Egg. This is used in Zulok, any kind of deck that has buffs to creatures. It's just a good preventative of AoE. Yeah, it's a good card to have. Hold on to. Sun Fury Protector is primarily used in Handlock, but I've seen it used as utility in other decks. When you're facing a lot of aggro, this card might come out once in a while. Injured Blade Master is only used in Priest decks, but if you plan to make a Priest deck, more often than not, Injured Blade Master will be in there, so hold on to that card. When you have a meta that is very heavy Hunter, Face Hunter, or whatever version of Mage that there happens to be a lot of. Usually it's just like the high amount of spell Mage. Kazan Mystic is it's a meta call. Some people put one in their deck by default. I usually see what I'm playing against during the day and make that call if it warrants a spot for it or not. But it's definitely a card that you hold on to. You'll find it using it more than you think, and it works really well. Twilight Drake is primarily used in Handlock. people don't really run too many silences these days, so yeah, it's a good card to hold on to again. If you end up playing Handlock, this is a primary card. Oh, it's a dragon too. You get some dragon synergies if you wanna play a dragon deck. I don't really play dragon decks, so. Argent Commander is a solid minion, 4/2 Divine Shield charge. You'll always get 4 damage in, and he'll live unless you hit what? I think the only card is like Abomination that can kill it. But anyways, it's a solid card. I wouldn't disenchant it. It finds its way into aggro decks. It finds its way. It's a good filler if you have a spot for something. I'll just stick it in there. 6 mana does run into legendary range. There's some better legendaries out there, but in aggro decks, sometimes the card makes it. You could disenchant it if you want, but might as well just hold on to it. Sunwalker, when you're facing a lot of aggro, you'll see it in Druid Taunt decks. You can play it in any deck. When you have a lot of aggro, it's a very good 6-drop to stop the pain. Don't disenchant it. You'll occasionally use it, so have at least one on hand. Okay, so now these are the top tier rares that you should have. You should always have 2 of. They're used more frequently than any other card. Yeah, so let's get started. Knife Juggler, used almost in every aggro deck, some tempo decks. It even makes its way into Paladin Quartermaster decks, which are sometimes control. It's a very useful card, high utility. It's really good. Keep it. Have 2 of them. Next up is Wild Pyromancer. Again, this card is used a little bit less, but it's still used a lot. Paladins use it with equality. Priests use it to deal 1 damage. Excuse me. It's used quite frequently in classes that can't deal 1 damage to help facilitate board clears and removal of creatures. Mind Control Tech. Some Druid decks run this card by default. This is a meta call. If you're facing a lot of Zoo or Zoo-ish decks, this card will help out a lot. It's awesome. But if you're facing a lot of control, they're just sitting there removing your stuff, this card won't be in your deck. This is a meta call. Keep it on the bench. Use it when needed. Defender of Argus. This card is used in a lot of aggro decks. This card is used in Handlock. This card is used in anything. It's a very good card. If you add up the stats, and you can hit 2 minions with it. It's a 4/5 for 4, but the surprise +1/+1 on 2 creatures can help you stay out of AoE range, avoid consecrations, avoid flame strikes, avoid lightning storms, things like that. Azure Drake. Probably, is it number 1? I'd say arguably it's number 1 rare card. This card is, if you look at almost any deck, non-aggro deck, it's probably in there. This makes it into rogue decks. This makes it into mage decks, druid decks. It's a solid 5-drop, +1 spell damage, helps out a lot. It's a very good card, very good all-around card. Arguably number 1. The other arguably card, arguing card, excuse me, that get used a ton is Sledge Belcher. It's a 5 mana 3/5 with taunt. When it dies, you get a 1/2 with taunt. This card is very difficult to remove all the aspects of it. It's very sticky. At the very least, you're probably going to end up with a 1/2 taunt at the end of the beginning of your next turn after you play this creature. This card makes it into tons and tons and tons of decks. It's arguably number 1 between this, Sledge Belcher, and the Azure Drake. We're going to go over the epics now. These are the epics that you should keep. Big Game Hunter, Blood Knight, Shade of Naxxramas, Faceless Manipulator, Piloted Sky Golem, Sea Giant, Mountain Giant, Molten Giant. So the ones that are on the fence that you don't really need to hold on to, per se, is the Sea Giant, Molten Giant, Molten Giant, Mountain Giant. I need to learn how to read. So the deal with the Giants are, Sea Giant's good for aggro decks or when you're going to have a lot of minions on the board. You'll see them occasionally in Paladin decks. They're a little unreliable. I mean, it's great when you can play it for like 5 mana or less. You know, it's really surprising to your opponent. But in constructed, they're gonna have removal for it, and you're gonna be better off with a legendary like Sylvanas or something like that. So occasionally you'll see Sea Giants, Shaman decks, Paladin decks, but not too often. They're pretty rare. So you can go ahead and probably disenchant that. Unless you plan on playing Handlock, Mountain Giant, and Molten Giants are rarely ever used in any other kind of deck. You'll occasionally see like Freeze Mage run Molten Giants or Druid run Molten Giants with the Tree of Life. Not too frequently though, unless you're trying to play those niche decks or you like Handlock. If you're not going to play any of those, I would just disenchant them. Get the dust. All right, so next is the regular epic cards that you should hold on to. Don't disenchant these. These are good to have on your bench. Rotate them into your deck when you need them. So first off is Blood Knight. Occasionally there'll be a Paladin meta, and Paladins like to run Shielded Minibot. Sometimes, I mean, back in the day, you would see Argent Squires. If you yourself are playing a Divine Shield deck, Blood Knight will be in there. If you can hit Blood Knight, even for 1 Divine Shield, it's huge. If you can hit 2 Divine Shields, it's unruly. This is a meta card. Very rarely it makes it in due to meta, but you'll see it sometimes. Shade of Naxxramas. This card is used in quite a few decks. Primarily, I see it in Druid combo decks. It's to get damage guaranteed onto the face or set up for a combo the following turn with Force Nature, Savage Roar. It's pretty solid. Most of the time, it'll live through the turn. The only classes you really have to worry about are like, I don't know, Paladin or... I mean, a lot of classes have AoE that can deal 2 damage, but it usually lives, usually grows. You either play Shade of Naxxramas or you play Harvest Golem. I prefer Shade of Naxxramas. It's a gameplay call again. Next card is Faceless Manipulator. This card will be in some decks, combo decks, Warlock combo that wants to do like, 20 plus damage on a turn with double power overwhelming and, blah blah blah. But Faceless Manipulator is a good card if you don't have a full set of cards. It can sub in for a legendary. You can copy your opponent's card. You can copy a really good card that you play. It's good. It's a good card. It's a gameplay card. It's different. It throws enough of a curveball at your opponent when they're not expecting it that it makes it a good card. Piloted Sky Golem. In any kind of like mech deck that's control, or any kind of deck that wants sticky minions, and you already have like a Sylvanas, you'll see this card in there. And the number 1 epic card that sees a lot of gameplay due to Dr. Boom is Big Game Hunter. Almost every deck runs 1 Big Game Hunter. Some decks run 2 Big Game Hunters. This guy's primary target is Dr. Boom. He kills legendaries like it's his job. Yeah, I mean, this is the number 1 epic card that's used in most of the decks. So don't ever disenchant this. It's a very good card. More often than not, you'll hit something with it. So play him, use him, don't ever disenchant him. Alright, so now we're moving on to the legendary cards, which ones to keep. These are, okay, reiterate, these are the cards to keep. Everything else you can disenchant. Everything else you can disenchant. But these are the keepers, alright? Here we go. We got Blood Mage Thalanos, Harrison Jones, Leroy Jenkins. This is arguable, but Lotheb, Emperor Thorson, Hogger, Sylvanas, Black Knight, Baron Geddon, Dr. Boom, Kel'Thuzad, Ragnaros, Sneed's Old Shredder, Alexstrasza, Nefarian, and Ysera. Okay, so now I'm going to go over the ones that are on the fence. They make it into a few decks, but they might necessitate you to need to keep them around. So the first card is Leroy Jenkins. Actually, when I was going over the list, I even thought about it. I'm like, do you really need this one? But I would keep him around. But if you want, you could disenchant it. I only see him now in Face Hunter decks. You can't play him in like Miracle Rogue. It's too unreliable. It's too hard to hit Thorson with Leroy Jenkins to do anything like any kind of combo like that. So you really only see him in Face Hunter decks, and even then, he's optional. So I'd probably get rid of him. I don't know. It's up to you. You can make the call. The next one is Baron Geddon. The only time I ever see this card played is in Control Warrior. I don't see it ever played in any other deck. But the funny part is, this card is like unbelievable in Control Warrior. Like it's a necessity. So definitely keep it around if you plan on playing Control Warrior. If not, just get rid of it. Sneed's Old Shredder. This is a playstyle kind of card. It's very slow. This card is extremely slow. It's in-constructed. It's also very hard to hit the death rattle. Usually it'll get silenced or CC'd somehow, and you won't be able to get it off. This is a playstyle kind of card. It doesn't fit into my playstyle. It's too slow for me. But some people like it. It works really good in death rattle decks. If you plan on playing really slow controlled decks, this card will make it in. Speaking of slow, Ysera is also extremely slow. Is it a she? Yeah, I think it's a she. She's very slow. Her cards are awesome. If you can get them off, you'll see them. You'll see Ysera played in Paladin decks. You'll see it. You'll see her in Dragon decks, definitely. It's an extremely endgame card. If for some reason the meta is heavy priest, which it never is, Ysera is a good card. But other than that, you can probably disenchant it. There's other better legendaries here, as you'll see in a second. These are I'm gonna go over now the ones that you should hold on to that aren't on the fence, but they're good enough to just keep around on the bench. Harrison Jones. We'll start with Harrison Jones. He's the first one. This is a meta call, also a playstyle kind of call. If you happen to be facing a lot of paladins, rogues, warriors, whatnot, this card will make it into your deck. It's very good. Even if you draw one card and destroy their weapon, it's a huge swing. If you can manage to draw multiple cards, even better. Lotheb, you'll keep around. This is a playstyle call. I like to use this with aggro decks. He prevents board clears, prevents death through combos like Force Nature, Savage Roar, or if you're fighting a Freeze Mage or something like that, he'll give you an extra turn to do what you have to do. And in that sense, he's very valuable. Next up is Hogger. Hogger is a playstyle call. You get 6/6 of value when you play him, which is 6 for 6/6 is standard. But if you can get off another, if you can get 2 nulls off, then it's worth it. This card, you don't see it too often, but sometimes he fits into a deck. But with the release of Emperor Thorson, Hogger kind of takes a backseat, so he might be borderline Disenchant too, now that I think about it. Alright, next up is Black Knight. This is a meta call again. If you happen to be fighting like Druids all day, and they just play taunts, they don't even run combo. They just play Ancient of War and Sun Fury. Not Sun Fury, Sunwalkers. Black Knight is like unbelievable if you can hit it. Otherwise, it's just a 4/5, but it's optional. Like it's all based on the meta. So, Kel'Thuzad. This is also a playstyle card. I personally am not a huge fan of it, but some people make it work. I tend to prefer Ragnaros, but some people prefer Kel'Thuzad. So, again, it's a playstyle thing. You can make a choice. Alexstrasza is used in a few decks. Freeze Mage, Warrior. Don't think I've seen it in Druid, because Druids can do constant damage, but they're used in combo decks, control decks. You'll never see Alexstrasza in a aggro deck. She's pretty much used to set up the opponent to kill in 1 or 2 turns after you use her, or if you happen to be fighting a lot of aggro that day, she can heal you. You know, she's a good utility card to have. Don't ever disenchant her. Nefarian is the new card. Add 2 random spells from your opponent's class. Battlecry. This is a little too RNG for me, but some people like it. It's a dragon. It'll make it into a dragon deck. Keep it on your bench. Don't disenchant it. Okay, so now I'm going to do the legendary cards that you should absolutely not disenchant. These are the top tier legendary cards. They get used most frequently other than any other. First, we'll start with Blood Mage Thalnos. The card doesn't look like much. Spell damage +1, death rattle, draw a card. It's a 1/1, you know, whatever. But the utility of this card is unreal. You need to draw a card. You play this card, it'll draw you a card. It's a 1/1. It's not going to get silenced. You need to squeeze out 1 spell damage, which sometimes is huge. This card is game-changing. So don't ever disenchant Blood Mage Thalnos. It doesn't look like much, but it's a very important card. It gets used in a lot of decks. Mage decks, Druid decks, Rogue decks. Any deck this is gonna sound stupid, but any deck that benefits from drawing a card and using if spell damage can help a little bit, this card will be in there. So keep it around. Emperor Thorson. This card is in almost every deck. It's a little imbalanced. Any deck that's not going to dump its hand, it'll be in there. You can do some silly, very silly combos with this. Even if it reduces all the mana of your hand by 1, you can still do some silly combos. This card makes it into all types of decks, any kind, you know, from Grim Patron Warriors to Control Paladins to combo Druids. This card will be in there. You'll see it a lot. It's everywhere. Hold on to this card. Sylvanas Windrunner. This lady, this dark lady right here, she is used a lot. Death Rattle, take control of enemy minion, 5/5. This card is in almost every control deck. Uh, for 6 mana, you can't really play a better card. It's like the 6th mana drop. Enough said. She's queen of the 6. All right, next up is Dr. Balance. Excuse me, Dr. Boom. Dr. Boom is 7/7, summon 2 1/1 boom bots. The 1/1 boom bots, when they die, have a death rattle, and they do 1 to 4 damage, randomly split amongst your enemy's characters. This card is number 1, I think. Yeah, it's number 1. It's clearly number 1. This card makes it into every deck. I've seen this card in aggro decks. I've seen this card in tempo decks, mid-range, all control, anything. This card is everywhere. It's when you drop this card, it sets up board presence, and if your opponent won't be able to remove everything about this card either. Like, they'll either be able to remove the 7/7 and then you'll have 2 1/1 boom bots, or they'll remove the boom bots and you'll have a 7/7. Like, this card is really imbalanced. Everybody knows it. Everybody plays it. It's the number 1 card. Don't get rid of it. Next card up is Ragnaros. You play it turn 8, and it deals 8 damage. Like, it's playing like a 8, like 8 charge minion, but it doesn't actually have to hit the target. So your opponent plays Ragnaros, you play Ragnaros, you kill their Ragnaros, or you need to do 8 damage to the opponent's face. This is the card, and they have taunts all in front of you or something like that. This is one of my favorite cards. It's used in a lot of decks, a lot of control decks. Don't ever get rid of it. Hold on to it. It's a good card.